Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited and thrilled to have Mike Ingram with us today. Mike is the CEO of Maverick Investment Group, president and CEO of Electronic Concepts and Engineering, and president and CEO of Shaden Avionics. You're going to get a great look into, aviation, defense, aerospace, and his international work. So this will be a real special episode. But Mike, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Skip. Appreciate the time this morning.
No, for sure. Yeah, so you had mentioned before we hopped on here, you just came back from Vegas from a business jet conference. Maybe kind of get into what it is that you
Sure.
do and just kind of your origin story, if you will, around kind of that whole sector.
No, great. So there was a National Business Jet Show, NBAA, which is a business aviation show. All the big players go, big avionics and aerospace providers on the commercial side. We don't have the Boeing and the Airbuses, but up through large cabin business jets like Gulfstreams and Bombardier and a few others, and all the other players, all the other suppliers. And a lot of discussion around new technology, a lot of business to business, B2B type meetings. Just a really good opportunity for a lot of companies to get together and talk about how we map out the future together. But this year, really, the show was about AI. It was about innovation, a lot of new things going on. But yeah, so I lead Maverick Investment Company, which is a private equity owned holding company of multiple, right now, avionics companies, but we're always looking for new companies to join. Shaden Avionics is in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, just a southwest suburb of Minneapolis. And Electronic Concepts and Engineering is based out of Holland, Ohio, which is a suburb of Toledo. So yeah, I do manage and lead both of those. It's a challenge to juggle everything going on. They both do very similar things. We do electronics for aircraft. One more, I'd say, on the military side, and the other has a good mix of both military and civil type applications. Both small companies, under 50 people each. It's innovative, but it's also we have to make revenue and produce products and manufacture products to a pretty wide range of customers from the primes like Sikorsky and Boeing and Lockheed to smaller companies. Some ones here in Minnesota like Cirrus and Whip Air, which does floats for smaller craft. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of different things going on, and keeps your mind going and your energy up.
No, that's awesome. Well, good. Well, I mean, maybe kind of touch in how you came to Maverick. And I know, again, before we hopped on here, you talked a little bit about, some of the international work you've done and also with some big, large global companies for
Sure.
coming into the private equity space.
Sure. Yeah. So I went to college back on the East Coast, electrical engineering degree, and had a good 10-ish years of foundational electrical engineering work, doing design work, schematic software, building boards, doing basically around the focus of GPS equipment and inertial navigation equipment. It was really interesting stuff. And then jumped over into the evil side, as people say, but going on to the business side, up through product management and then into executive leadership. And I was with a small company for about 12 years called Aviation. We did avionics equipment for small aircraft like Cirrus and Pipers and Cessna aircraft. And I knew that the world was bigger than this small company that I was in. And it was right through the housing crisis in the late 2000s. And so I jumped on board with GE, had the opportunity to go become an expat over in Asia in Shanghai for 2 years, which then turned into four and eventually turned into six. But it was a great opportunity to learn Chinese culture, Chinese business, Chinese aviation, to be one of the people who brought some of the world technology over to Asia to help them, get that off the ground for them. I also at that time went through the GE leadership program in Crotonville, and really great program to become an executive. And then moved on to Honeywell when I came back and led a big portion of their avionics group out of Phoenix, Arizona. Did that for about 3 years and ran its course through COVID, which was real interesting times. I'm sure other people have talked to you about that, and you obviously
Yes.
do that through your recruiting and all. And I really looked back at my career at that point and said, okay, what did I love to do? And gave it some thought. I really loved being in small business, having the agility and the flexibility and less bureaucracy,
Huh.
and had the opportunity to come and lead a couple companies and move out of Phoenix into the Minneapolis Twin Cities area. And it's whenever you make a decision, there's no looking back. There are good
Huh.
things and bad things about different places I've been over my career, but this is I'm really happy with where I'm at. I'm happy with being able to lead these two companies out of a basically a turnaround situation and put them on the right trajectory, and they're proceeding pretty well. We're having a good year on both of them, exceeding our plans on both of them, likely to exceed our plans on both of them, and we continue to grow into the future.
Oh, it's super exciting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. How about how, as you've kind of gone through the course, how has your personal definition of leadership changed as you've evolved throughout your career?
Yeah, that's interesting. So being in the middle of all the activity in small companies, it takes a certain kind of leadership. You can delegate some things, but you can't delegate too much because there's just not enough people to do all the things that have to get done. So there's a combination of hands-on leadership, which when you're in a bigger company, you delegate much more down to your team, which is obviously a broader team, and they obviously delegate down the path as well. So it's important to have the skills and the foundation to be able to do the work that your team is doing, and that's why I mentioned earlier on having that electrical engineering foundation to be able to speak the language, be able to speak the FAA language about how things are certified, understand your customers' problems and being able to solve those problems. And then as a leader, figuring out where is your time most valuable. And currently my time is most valuable in these companies out talking to our customers, doing business development, going to trade shows like I was this week.
Uh-huh.
And and being an outside leader is really important, but then also bringing back that and being that inside leader to make sure the boat is continually steered in the right direction.
Yeah.
Um, but I when I look at where I've been and your question about leadership, you look at the different parts of the world, and I did a short expat assignment in Europe as well. The US is all about how we innovate. It's about innovation. If you go over to Europe, it's really most about regulation.
Hmm.
There's so much FAA and oversight and a lot of things that happen out of Europe. And if you look at what happens in Asia, especially China, it's
Yeah.
about imitation. And I say that in a kind way.
Huh.
They don't have as much of the skills to be able to build and innovate technology themselves. So they imitate, steal, whatever you want to call it, a lot of the technology from the US and bring it to their people. So to be able to understand what the intentions are of your customers and the people that you're working with is just so important, to be able to create and track forward in a successful way.
Yeah. Any particular, I mean, specifically in China and Asia, just different customs or cultures is how they do business or even how they lead their people?
Yeah, there's a lot of parts
I'm
of
sure
that
that's a
question.
I'm sure that's a 10-hour conversation, but
Yeah. Um,
maybe
it's
things that shocked you when you were over there or
well,
confirmed what you already thought.
yeah, there was a lot of surprises. The one thing that you have to understand is that when you're in a room of people, and I worked a lot with the executives in China, so like presidents, CEOs of Chinese organizations, which are they call them state-owned enterprises, which is basically government-owned organizations.
Uh-huh.
And I would present to my board of directors, which is a joint venture, so it's half Chinese and half U.S. Half of the team was GE executives, and the other half was Chinese executives. And it was always an interesting contrast of what the intentions were of the board. The Chinese intentions were really to take the technology that was put into the joint venture and train the Chinese engineers that were on staff. We had 50-ish expats over in China teaching how we do our engineering processes to the Chinese so they could go and do it themselves over the course of time. Um, the US and the other half of the joint venture was, how does GE go and create more business in China? How do we grow our aviation footprint on where China's going in their air transport and aerospace path? So it was, how do you create and craft a message that caters to both of those different strategies of why the joint venture is in existence? So it was really interesting and challenging. You'd have the board meetings and present and be able, and have to try to navigate through that. And then you'd go and have a dinner and then have other conversations and really dig out what the intentions were, because a lot of those intentions wouldn't necessarily come out in the board meeting per se, but they would come out in more private conversations. So it was an interesting part of the culture and ways to do business.
Yeah, very, very interesting. How about any, I don't know, any, I mean, I get in the US or even in your travels, any innovative approaches to leadership and management that, aha moments that have happened for you that you're employing now and with Maverick and Shaden and ECE?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, well, there's some new innovative ways to do things, but it comes down to a lot of the traditional ways of just being a good supplier to your customers. In my small businesses, we have to work a lot with the innovative companies that are doing innovative work out there. I'm not out generating and bringing in a ton of venture capital, but my customers are, or they're big companies that have that investment power, but they need certain products from us. So, like for example, a couple of the applications that we're on, one is a military platform. It's called Loyal Wingman. So this is a unmanned drone that is created that goes out in front of an F-35, which is our, top of the line fighter jet for
Yeah.
80 to $100 million a piece. And they have these basically $2 or $3 million drones that fly out in front of the human fighter jet and basically take a bullet for it. They call it a loyal wingman. They call it
Interesting.
attributable. So if there's an attack from a ground missile or whatever, that's the vehicle that'll
Huh.
sacrifice itself. So, like I said, we have some product on that, and it's really important for us to be able to create that product that meets the demand, meets the delivery, that has all the pedigree to be able to be on a flying vehicle for the time that it is. So it's important that we have all those standards, that we're meeting our customers' requirements, that we're eventually, up through the food chain to get to the government delivery as well. It's just extremely important. And if we were to fail, then that government program would not be as successful as it could be.
Yeah.
And the same on the commercial side. There's a huge push in aviation to go more autonomous.
Okay.
So, there's autonomous cars, which
Huh.
I'd say is one of the more difficult challenges when it comes to autonomy. When you're in an airplane, there's a lot of open sky. So, and
Uh-huh.
we've been flying in autopilots and flight control systems for many, many years. Planes have been able to auto land themselves for decades. And now we're seeing how that becomes more and more part of, say, smaller aircraft flying, where you're having kind of a third person or an artificial intelligence person in the cockpit overseeing what a pilot does. And we're not there yet, but that's where some of the aviation is going. But we're on a program right now. I can't disclose it, but we're on a program right now that will be unmanned cargo feeders. So, big UPS or FedEx truck lands or truck airplane lands at an airport at 2 a.m. The cargo gets loaded from that into a small, say, Cessna Caravan, which would take, like, say, 2 pallets. And that airplane right now has a couple pilots on it that flies from, say, Memphis to, I don't know, Austin, Texas.
Uh-huh.
Well, pilots don't like to fly in the middle of the night. They'd rather be sleeping. So, these unmanned airplanes are going to, at some point very soon, basically put the cargo in the back of the airplane. The airplane will take off without a pilot, go land wherever it's supposed to land, and then, it goes from there. So there's a lot of that activity going on, and it's just fun to be a part of that. And again, we're not creating, we're not taking in money to do that whole airplane, that whole infrastructure, but we're providing a piece of that into that customer. We hope that they become successful. And obviously that rolls down to us that we can generate more revenue and be more successful.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
That's very cool. How about any other, trends, opportunities, things in the market that are just really exciting for you?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's probably saw the Elon Musk super heavy, his Starship landing back on the chopstick catch
Unbelievable.
or whatever that was. I
That's
mean, that
incredible.
even talking about it gives me goosebumps.
I
It's
know.
so phenomenal. We're dabbling a little bit in the space sector. The businesses, both businesses, are what I call high mix, low volume. So we'll do a lot of different smaller jobs, and we'll collect non-recurring engineering or funding from our customer and do a customized solution and then have some amount of low volume on the end. And that's kind of where the space industry is right now. It's not automotive where they're building 10,000 cars a year and there's, a huge amount of production. But so that's, like I said, that's where we'll take on a job from a Lockheed or one of these bigger companies, do say a few dozen prototypes, and then we wait for the big volume opportunity to come down the road, which is probably a few years out. And that's really part of the turnaround of these businesses is they've gotten stuck in that high mix situation and they've failed to have those high volume type of production opportunities on the back end. So I'm really driving the businesses into that strategy. Looking at the opportunities that come into the building that we pursue and making sure we're pursuing the ones that have the more volume on the back end than just being engineering programs.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fun.
that is very cool. How about, with Maverick and then doing Shaden and ECE? I mean, what are the, I don't know, strategies that have proven most effective for identifying and capitalizing on high growth opportunities, whether it's, acquiring companies, or how do you look at that piece of things?
Yeah, it's getting out there. It's networking, in the industry, going to trade shows, having customer conversations. It's it's building the credibility, and none of this happens, in a couple days or a couple weeks. It's doing a first job or program that may not be the most profitable program, but you get in there and they start to trust you. You start to build the credibility and ECE engineers, they can save our program. They're smart people. They can make me successful as my customer would think. The customer is successful, then they'll continue to bring you on for more and more work. And that's an age-old type of strategy. It's nothing new. But it is so important to be, here listening to your customer, not doing, your own thing, but really understanding them and building what they need to be built. So as you continue to get more and more smaller programs, then, the bigger ones will come. For example, we're seeing that right now with Collins. Collins Aerospace, now owned by RTX, big Raytheon conglomerate. Over the years, we've continued to do small programs. This year, we won Supplier of the Year for them, and it's 6 companies out of about 58, 6 or 7,000 companies
Wow.
that win that on an annual basis. And little shade and tiny little shade, and
Incredible.
it's great. I mean, it's been really good for us to gain more business from them. We're expecting some big programs to come into the building probably next year, early next year. So I mean, that's how you do it. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time.
Yeah. How about any particular, challenges that you faced and, when building the businesses, and how'd you overcome those?
Yeah, the challenges are it's all about people.
Hmm.
Um, and you're in that business.
Yeah.
So it's getting the right people in the right seats. It's so important. The Good to Great book is a great book
Yes.
about how to do that. It sacrificing maybe their core expertise, but you get the right talent and you can take your business and your strategy anywhere it needs to go. So yeah, that's a big part of it. one of the things that I'm just starting my step into, and I think you're on it. I'm not 100% sure, but onto the entrepreneurial operating system.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Um, so, being in big companies, they have operating systems inherent in their business. So they have whole organizations that have these operating systems. For example, Honeywell has an operating system called HOS, Honeywell Operating System. Very creative there.
Uh-huh.
But it gives the whole organization a direction and a process and a way to do things in order to be successful as a business. When you get into a small business, it's chaos. I mean, there's
Right.
people doing multiple jobs to just get things done. And it's important. I mean, everybody's high energy and it is productive, but it's a chaotic productive. So what I like about EOS is it has a full set of tools that allow us to have that big company operating system and those tools available without having to, organically create them myself. So, like I said, we've just started that journey. We had our first meeting, our offsite meeting last month. We have another one coming up. Actually, it was this month. Have another one coming up early next month, and I'm excited for where it's going to take us. It's hopefully going to organize us to have the right people in the right seats,
Uh-huh.
get get everything, our vision in place, our strategy more directed. But again, back to your original question, it's about people that has been the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
The loss of knowledge and the loss of skills, the turnover, especially through the back end of COVID, the great resignation, um, is a struggle to make sure we, maintain talent and find right talent that's not overly expensive for the amount of revenue that we have as a business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to speak to EOS, I mean, EOS has transformed our business and we have lots of clients on EOS. And I mean, one within the first year, they 10x their business. I mean,
Wow.
many have done beyond that over, the course of years, but it's such a powerful way to, especially to just take entrepreneurial organizations like you're talking about, the chaos, and let's formalize and professionalize our processes, get the people in the right seats, and just the rocket fuel that that creates to really grow a business. It's incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
How about maybe on the people piece? I mean, and maybe EOS is part of this, but what's your approach to like attracting and retaining like high performance leaders within the companies?
Yeah, I mean that's the challenge. So one of the advantages that we have in an aerospace type company is people are passionate about
Right.
aerospace. People are passionate about flying.
Hmm.
So to go out and find those is is the way to do it, but it's also not easy. There's so you have pilots who love to fly, you have flight attendants who love to be a part of that role, but we need engineers that also have a the impulse to be in aviation.
Uh-huh.
And being a small company, Minneapolis isn't really known for being a huge aerospace mecca.
Hmm.
The same with Toledo. So that's probably the hardest thing is getting talent, first finding the talent and then getting them to move locally into those locations. So my most success has been to find people here in the area, and then you don't have to move them here. They're not
Right.
going to move away after, a short period of time. But there's just not that huge pool of talent. I mean, there's definitely some here, but maybe this podcast will help me, attract a
Right.
few more.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's been the biggest challenge. The other way to just attract talent and to get them excited is we work on a lot of different things.
Hmm.
It's not somebody working on the same program for 5 years or being, niched in the, say, a government job that you only do this for, 10 or 15, 20 years. Our engineers will work on a program for a few weeks or a couple months and then be able to go work on another program. So the variety of work is pretty interesting. It can be stressful at times too, and don't get me wrong, but I think they get excited about not doing the same thing and continuing their learning process and growth that way. But what I'm really pushing to do is grow the company, and as the company grows, there'll be more opportunities for people in the organization, especially the younger ones, to have a successful career path as it grows. If you're a big company, there's always ways to step up in a big company because you have those hierarchies. In a small
Right.
company, it's very flat. So the whole company needs to grow in order to create those, leadership opportunities for the younger ones.
Yeah. So how have you thought about just building culture and core values within the organizations?
Yeah, culture is important. I'm trying to get better at that. I will say I'm definitely not an expert there. We've been lucky to have some great people on board that create some of that organic culture, but it's really building an environment that people aren't afraid to push back. They're not afraid to speak their mind. That there's a trust in the organization. My door is always open. That type of environment and culture is important. But we do also try to have a little bit of fun here and there.
Uh-huh.
I think we need to have more fun. But it's also hard to do that when you're in an engineering organization and engineers don't party like the business guys and
Yeah.
people do. So it's a balance. But everybody likes to have fun while they work as well. So it's important to have that. And one of the ways to attract talent, which we saw especially in the market during COVID, is to be able to have a balance of working from home as well as in the office. So about a year and a half ago, I brought in and changed our work model to be a hybrid work model. So,
Okay.
they can work a couple days at home, 3 days here in the office. And it's been a way to attract talent because there was many people, as soon as you heard, oh yeah, we're 100% in the office, they're like, all right, I'm going to look somewhere else.
Right.
And so and we've kept that through. I know some people are forcing their people back to the office, but we've kept it. It's been successful for us. And you just have to trust your employees, which is not always easy to do, but you just have to trust them and that they are putting in their best effort no matter where they're sitting, what seat they're sitting in.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about just being in our we talked about Europe, we talked about China, but being in America in a full-on capitalist free market society, how has that benefited, the business you're currently running or just in your career? How has just the free markets and capitalism been a positive?
Well, so aerospace and aviation, it's the largest market is here in the States.
Uh-huh.
And I think because there's the most freedom, inherently aviation is a way to be free from anything. I mean, you're free from the ground, right? You're flying
Uh-huh.
in three-dimensional space. They, you can still get in your airplane and not have to talk to anybody. Just basically like going for a walk in the woods. You just take off from if there's a towered airport, you obviously have to talk to the tower and get sequenced into the rest of the traffic. But there are places you can just, take off your airplane and go fly around, never talk to anybody, just like walking in the woods or,
Uh-huh.
swimming in a lake. It's a beautiful opportunity. Um, so, I think the capitalism part of aviation is just it's inherently there.
Mm.
If you come out with a good product, you can go to an Oshkosh trade show, which is
Oh,
this big trade show in Wisconsin every summer. And if you have a good product, you can set up a stand and sell your product, and somebody will buy it and put it in their
uh-huh.
airplane. It's so that part of trade is still very vibrant and still very available in the aviation space. It's it's obviously it's a very highly regulated space. If you want to go put your widget or your invention on an airplane that is certified, then that's going to be a high barrier of entry and probably costs, hundreds, maybe millions of dollars to do. And there are companies that are successfully doing that. Garmin is the biggest success
Huh.
in our space in small aircraft. And they started with one product back in the 80s, early 90s, a GPS based product, and it's just snowballed ever since. And now they're, they're the big gorilla in the general aviation space. And it's all about, they've built a great product at a great price and they're selling it like crazy,
Yeah.
and pilots love it. Some pilots not so much, but it's what you have to buy, and it's because they've kept to their basic principles of low cost, high technology, very reliable and innovative. They just brought out, it's probably 3 or 4 years now, they brought out this emergency auto land system where if the pilot's flying the airplane and he becomes incapacitated, there's a button on the panel. One of the passengers can hit the button, and the airplane will search around for an airport, announce to the world over its radio on ATC that there's an emergency. It'll find the airport and go land itself and taxi down the runway and stop.
That's
Um,
incredible.
it's amazing. It's totally amazing. And so that type of free market innovation is what keeps aviation going. It continues to get safer and safer and safer. It can always get more safer, and that's where we see more innovation happening, even on the AI side, where
Huh?
a pilot and the memory and training of a pilot is immense. You have to learn and understand so much. So if you can take away some of that need, I'm not saying that a pilot can become more stupid or less educated, but if there's help there to remind the pilot of a bad situation to get in, it's kind of like cruise control in your car. You're making things a little bit easier so that you can focus on other things. There's more and more of that happening, and there's companies doing that all the time. Companies like Skyrise or Reliable Robotics, or they can name a whole ton of them, and it's overall creating a safer aviation environment. So it's innovation fuels a lot of the safety in aerospace, and at some point it's going to be, well, I haven't even talked about electric aircraft. I'll do
Yeah,
that
go
later.
for it.
But if at some point flying a car is going to be like the Jetsons, or flying a plane is going to be like the Jetsons, and there's companies, there used to be like maybe 200 or 300 companies, and they've kind of continued to go and close up because of the funding. And there's still probably a dozen or so companies that are basically building an electric, they call it an eVTOL, but electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. It's a for the most part an electric helicopter, but it's battery powered. They have really interesting, unique designs. And the concept is to avoid a lot of the inner city traffic.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'll name some of the companies. Kind of the forefront is Joby, but there's Archer, there's Beta Technologies. There's a new one coming up called Supernal. But some of the traditional guys are out there, Textron and Honda, all building these vehicles because of this new market that's coming out. And these vehicles will basically take up, vertically take off like a helicopter and then go for 20, 30 minutes and then land like a helicopter. And supposedly they'll get to the price of an Uber, probably an Uber X,
Huh.
initially, but they'll be flying so continuously that they're supposed to be, a lower cost alternative to sitting in traffic for 3 hours around LA.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I mean that's free market for you right there. I mean, whether the business case works, that's still yet to be determined, but there's billions and billions of dollars going into the Jobies and the Archers and the Betas to get this off the ground. And there's huge government support as well. The Air Force Research Labs, an organization called AFWorks, that is really pushing this technology along, and it's really forcing everyone in aerospace to look at things a bit differently. How do we, the concept is there's going to be thousands of these things flying around LA and Phoenix and some of the bigger cities. Well, when you get to that 1,000 vehicles, there's not enough people to talk over air traffic control to coordinate all of them coming in and out of the city. So you have to go digital. You have to, have this different type of communication infrastructure. So there's just movement everywhere in aerospace, and it's all not going to happen in the next 2 years. But over the course of, the next 5, 10, 20 years, there's just going to be very different way that we get around in transportation. It's really
That's
fun stuff.
wild. Wow. And you mentioned Oshkosh. Some of my best memories growing up are going with my dad and my grandfather to the Oshkosh Air Show and seeing like all the experimental planes. And then like, my grandfather flew B-29s in World War II. So seeing like the warbirds and those planes and
Yeah.
then the newer planes and the air
Did
show. And
you did you drive in or did you fly in?
so we went for years and years and years. Most of the time we drove, but then I think 3 years we flew in, that was pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Um, but they had, one year you could do a Concorde ride from Oshkosh, I think, to like New York and back in like 20 minutes or 30 minutes. We didn't do that, but we did do a ride on, what is it, a Ford Trimotor. So the first, commercial passenger plane. So we flew out, went on a 15-minute ride, 20-minute ride in that. One year they had, SR-71 Blackbird. One year it was F-22 Raptor. There was like a feature plane, and I mean, they just blew my mind growing up as a kid, and then seeing the F-22 just like, you know, go speed of sound past you, and then stop right in front of everybody, and kind of go up and down like a Harrier, and then just kind of twist, and then just go full speed. It's like watching a video game. It was
Yeah.
like forever that will be just imprinted in my mind. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, talk about love of aviation and people of all ages just, coming together and sharing that
Yeah.
passion.
It's gone the test of time, right? I mean, that show's been
Yes.
going on for a huge amount of time. I don't know how long, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger. I've flown in a few times. I'm a pilot, but I've flown in a few times and been on a couple of different types of demo flights. I was on the Aeroshell. There's like six of them that go in formation and doing loops and everything
Oh
else, and
yeah.
you pick people up in them. So that was one of my highlights of Oshkosh. Just really, really fun. But that's the Experimental Aviation Association, EAA, that
Right.
puts that on, and it is, they have some really fun events like the short takeoff and landing contest. There's lots of whenever you're there and you're in the middle of the afternoon and you have whether it's the Thunderbirds or Blue Angels or whatever, just kind
Yeah.
of shaking the ground. And
That's
I don't know, again, I'm talking about it and I get goosebumps because it's
yeah.
just so phenomenal. The air power that we have in this country
Yeah.
is so impressive. It's, where everybody wants it and
Right.
we have it and we display it, and it's awesome. It's cool stuff.
Yeah. And when you were describing those, EVs, like the helicopters, I mean, it makes me think of like when you see people flying drones around, like why wouldn't there be a drone where people just sit in it? It's just a giant drone,
Yeah.
looking like the other drones do. But that sounds similar to what
Well,
you're
they're doing it.
describing. Yeah.
They're doing it. I mean, it's the same way that Elon started out doing,
Right.
roadsters, and it slowly caught on. We're at the early parts of that. There may be a certified aircraft in that space next year.
Okay.
Um, there's a couple of traditional ones, small two-seat airplanes that are all electric. And just the architecture of electric airplanes it makes a lot of sense to not just have one propeller in front, with an electric motor rotating the propeller, that you're not really getting the benefit of what they call distributed power.
Uh-huh.
Um, I mean, ultimately, how an airplane flies is you're putting air over the wing. And so you have this big, 30-foot wing on the aircraft. So if you can blow more air over that wing, you get more lift. So if part of the concept is if you can put, 7 or 8 or 10 um, small fans out on the leading edge of the wing and blow more air over the wing, then you can get more lift.
Uh-huh.
So, and you can't really do that with putting small engines out across your wing, but you
Yeah.
can do it putting small motors out there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of concepts and really unique innovations happening along that line. But then there, as I mentioned, the eVTOLs, they're have these, just like the Osprey or the
Uh-huh.
the V-22,
Yeah.
that basically, has the big propellers that will go up and then rotate forward. There's a few vehicles, most of the ones that look like they're going to be successful do that, where
Okay.
they have these motors and pylons that will lift up and then rotate forward when you actually get enough air on your wing to lift the wing.
Uh-huh.
So it's like I said, there's billions of dollars. Joby's raised over $2 billion to
Oh,
get
wow.
their program going, and the FAA is marching along to get the regulations caught up. typically always a few steps behind innovation, but they're keeping pace better than you would think.
Yeah. How about any advice you'd give to aspiring entrepreneurs, whether they're young people or people that were in like corporate, like you were in GE that want to, get into the entrepreneurial space and maybe even to put a caveat on that, that are interested in aerospace and defense and aeronautics, any advice
Yeah,
you give those people?
I think about that all the time. Being a CEO of a company, and how do we fuel the innovation in a company like the ones I run right now? But even thinking about, hopefully my bosses don't read this, but thinking about if once I do the course of these companies, what innovative company and product would I want to go design and build and entrepreneur for myself? And it's really about living in the space. So if you sit behind your desk every day, and even if you're in a car company or a medical company, and you don't touch the technology, if you're not out there using it, you're probably not going to have an innovative thought or an innovative concept on a new product. You have to be out there doing it. So in aviation, as a pilot, I'm out there looking at the cockpit and looking at how an aircraft flies and thinking through, okay, if I had this widget, it would make my flying experience safer or better or different per se. Whether it's saving a little bit of fuel, whether it's navigating more safely because I can see other aircraft around me, whatever the case is. But until you immerse yourself in that environment, you don't have that creative spark that comes up. Same way with automotive people.
Uh-huh.
It's a lot easier to drive a car and work for a car company than it is to own and fly an airplane and work for an airplane company. But there's opportunities to do that, whether you know somebody or even going down to the airport and talking to people and who own aircraft and listening to their challenges or what they would like better about their airplane. It's really understanding your customer and understanding your environment that creates the opportunities. And then obviously, somebody like Elon who, looked up and maybe looked at the moon and thought, I want to build a company that goes there. Or, and it's, some people take larger risks and, are willing to do that and interested in doing that. And part of that is entrepreneurialism as well, is you have to take a risk. You have to put yourself out there. Sometimes you have to lay it all on the line. Coming back from Vegas, you double down on your blackjack, whatever your bet is.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And it's really those people who are willing to take the chance and roll the dice that, pays off sometimes. A lot
Yeah.
of times it doesn't, but sometimes it does.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's great.
being an entrepreneur is not easy. And you hear, I don't know how many podcasts you've listened to of Elon, but it's not
A
for
lot.
it's not for the lighthearted or somebody who's not willing to give it everything they got. You hear him, sleeping under his desk and things like that. I mean, that's obviously it's not normal, but it's gotten him success. And there's thousands of more stories like that where entrepreneurs are giving it everything they got. And I know a lot of CEOs now in the area here, and you have to have that. You have to have that grit and that dedication to do that in order to be successful or to get on your way to be successful. At some point you can take a little bit of a breather, but when you have it all on the line and your personal investment, your money's there,
Uh-huh.
means that much more. So I don't know if that answered your question about entrepreneurial ideas, but I think, just to go back and summarize, it's what is the industry, what does your customer need, and what experience do you have, and kind of merging those together and then putting, your full effort and your commitment into doing that. Um, and your customer may be, a whole industry need, not just, one customer that you talk to, but can an industry or can a application or whatever it is, a product need an improvement, and you have the ability to do that, and then have the determination to go invent it, but that's only still the smart part, the small
Right.
part as well. It's the 10%. It's the other 90% of marketing it and bringing it to market. That's the hard part.
Right. So true.
Yeah.
How about we'll wrap up with a couple questions. Looking back, any particular decision or action you would say that's been most pivotal in your success thus far?
Yeah, be willing to take a chance. The future is what you make of it. I hate to use that because that's a Honeywell term, but it does resonate. There's just obviously decisions you make all the way through your life. And whatever decisions you make, you have to live with those and make the best ever of everything of that decision. And, I look back at some decisions that I made that, kind of were unknowns. Even coming out of my graduate school, I did a master's degree over on the East Coast, and I had an opportunity to go live in Seattle. Knew nobody in Seattle, but it was like, okay, I don't know what power is bringing me to make this decision to move out of my comfort zone around my family and go on my own in Seattle, but I'm going to do it and give it a try. And
Uh-huh.
I want to make the most of it. And that's really what, I think people have to continue to do. I'm not saying move away from everywhere, but don't be afraid to make a big decision. Always make a decision that challenges you. Never make the easy decision, at least in your career and thinking about where to go in the future. Make those challenging decisions and you'll figure it out. Work hard. The harder you work, the more opportunities you have, including in school. The more better grades you have, the more options you have for decisions, whether it's going to a better college or better job, whatever. It just sets you up for that much better to be set up for your future and your career.
Yeah. No, very good. And how about last question? Like, what is your personal definition of success? And you can take that any way you want, personally, professionally, however you want.
Yeah, it's happiness.
Mhm.
It's to some level comfort. It's looking back at different points in your life. Maybe it's at the end of your career and saying, I made an impact, um, and I'm happy with the decisions I made. They weren't all the best or maybe correct decisions, but when a decision was made, I made the most of it. I tried my hardest, gave it every effort I got, and there's no turning back. And so I guess it's a contentment. Happiness is probably the wrong word, but it's a contentment with, you gave it everything you got. You left, as a sports analogy, you left everything on the field,
Uh-huh.
and you come out and you couldn't have given anything more. And I think that's what your success is. I mean, it's, obviously you have to do that ethically. You have to, make sure that you're not, lack of a better word, screwing people over
Right.
to climb in your success, but to do it the right way, to be humble when you do it. It's not, there's a lot of luck involved in a lot of the ways that you move through your career, but luck is what you make of it. You take advantage of the opportunities that come and you put yourself out there and know that if you're making decisions and you're doing them with the most data, you're the best person to make that decision. Don't rely on somebody else to do it. Take a chance, build your own confidence, but in the end of the day, be humble about it and know that your decisions will impact not only yourself, but a lot of other people in your organization, especially as you get up through the different leadership levels and now at CEO.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Well, good. Well, really appreciate this. This was
Yeah, no, this was
absolutely
fun.
fantastic. Yes. And we will put in all the show notes, info to reach out to you, to, the links to Maverick, to Electronic Concepts and Engineering, to Shaden. So that'll all be there in the show notes. But thank you very much, Mike. This is really a pleasure.
No, sounds good, Kip. I appreciate it.
All right. You bet. Thanks.